So I thought we could talk tonight about seeking results. Anybody ever done that? Alan Watts once described humans as result-seeking organisms. I mean, we're more than that too, but it is certainly, when we begin to consider what he may have meant by that, we can see that it is a function that we've all learned to do, that we spend a lot of time doing. Seeking results, something that's not present right now, but with some effort I can get to, I can attain, I can achieve that result. Right, so this can be played out in small ways, or lifetime goals. And just a silly, simple example. Let's say, post-COVID, post-Netflix era, you decide to go to the movies. And so, you can look up the internet, see what movies are playing and where they're playing and what time they start. You can figure out how long it's going to take you to get there, if you want to invite a friend or not. And then you drive there, and then you have to decide whether you want the popcorn or not, or what size. And then you finally get there and sit down and watch the movie. So watching the movie is the goal, and all those other steps along the way are just the things that we can anticipate that we have to do in order to get to the goal, right? Like I say, a silly example, but I mean, that's what we spend a great deal of time doing, sort of planning how to bring into our field, you could say, something that's not present, working towards a goal. Right. And then, there are big goals too, lifelong ambitions that are actually quite similar in that way. We decide where we want to get to, and then how we want to get to, what we need to do to get there, and then go through the steps. For many things, it's, a fairly well recognized path of what we need to do to get to some particular goal. You want to become a wealthy person. Well, there's lots of books and things out there that tell you how to do it, that work if you're willing to put in the degree of effort required, and the steps are sort of outlined to do that. And you can do it if you want. So I would say that most of our goals we do achieve. Most of them are the little ones, not necessarily the big ones, but it plays out enough in our life that we achieve what we set out to do. Not all the time, of course, but enough of the time to keep us in the game, to think that, yeah, this is pretty much how life works. That's how, that's what we were taught as kids. You work hard and, play right, and, you'll get what you want and be happy. So we've learned that it works, by and large, not always, but often enough. And so when we come into spirituality, we figure it's got to work the same way. I just have to figure out, the steps to get there. And, I know what the goal is. The goal is, well, we could say enlightenment, or, if not enlightenment, maybe that feels a little too ambitious, but, maybe, a high degree of peace and happiness. I'd be good with that. And then we set off down the path, right? And, a lot of the, sort of to-do steps along the way are, fairly common to most traditions. There's, meditation or contemplation. There's, morality, there's simplicity, there's silence, there's um, merit-based activities, learning to play nice with others. They're fairly common to most traditions. And then, of course, there's, um, some things that are just plain confusing. We hear different stories from different um, directions. Do we, um, what kind of diet is essential, vegetarian or not? How about celibacy or tantra? How about yoga? Is that necessary? Um, you know, about certain postures, sitting properly when you're meditating, how important is that? Um, Believing in a divine entity, or maybe several, or maybe none. What's the correct route there? So there we can get a lot of conflicting information. So how do we even choose about which road to go down? Are all paths equal? Do they all lead to the same place? How do we even decide which path to go on? Does it depend on the charisma of the teacher? The number of followers? Website rating? I don't know. You know, So these are all questions that come up, but I'd suggest they're all in the same vein, like I'm here, I want to get there. How do I get there? What do I need to do to get there? So there's at least as many choices as which movie to watch, right? You know, so how do I decide, and what do I need to do in order to get to my goal? Let's just use the placeholder enlightenment. um, however you term it, but the term doesn't matter. But just this distant goal of that will be somehow the payoff for this degree of effort, right? But the one thing that we don't ask is, who is it that's looking? We don't ask that at all. We just start right out of the gate. We just say, okay, what do I have to do? Tell me what I need to do. I'll do it. And as long as you ensure me that by doing those things, enlightenment will be waiting for me down the road, I'm good. I'll do it. You know, I know how that works. I've done it in my life. And, I just have to apply it in the spiritual sphere. And, I know that, I've got the perseverance to do it, right? But what we don't ask is, who is the one going on this quest? Who's that? It would seem like an obvious question, like, if we don't know who's going on the quest, what is the quest about? Is it just like a mechanical thing, like, um, you do steps A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and at the end there is the goal? But that's what we're given. As soon as we sort of walk into the spiritual sphere, um, there's a lot of truisms there about what will what's needed. What are the steps? What are the practices? Um, and so we sort of happily engage in those without really questioning, the underlying assumption of the methodology. I mean, what is it that, um, well, what is it that enlightenment even is? And obviously that can't be well defined. I mean, all we can do is make a sort of a crude stab at it. But, if forced to, we could say, well, whatever path we choose, I mean, if it's a valid path should be the most direct path to the discovery of our deepest nature and the recognition of um, non-separation from the rest of existence. Okay, so whatever can take us down that path most efficiently is a good path, right? Not all paths do that. So it's what we're looking for is really a cure rather than a lifelong medication, right? We're looking for a cure to a misunderstanding, really, rather than a lifelong practice. We may still, I'm not saying that, we may not choose to meditate, we may not choose to, um, you know, chant or sing or do lots of things, but there's a difference between doing it just out of sheer enjoyment and doing it because we think we're going down this path to reach something that is not now present but will be in the future as a result of my efforts, right? Does that feel different? So if we are engaged in these spiritual practices, whatever they are, over some period of time, months, years, perhaps longer, we may find ourselves becoming, there may certainly be, high times along the way, maybe a greater overall sense of just contentment, peace. That's nice. But there can also be pretty high degree of frustration, especially if we continue for some period of time, where it feels like, yes, there have been, rewarding moments, beautiful moments, maybe extraordinary moments, and yet it still feels like something's missing, something's lacking, and there's still more work to do. And there can be a sense of, you know, why is this so hard? Why can't I just sit for 30 minutes without my mind rushing in and taking me for a ride? Shouldn't I be farther along, in the spiritual quest that I am for all my years of effort, right? We can sort of almost blame ourselves for somehow being, I don't know, deficient or not quite living up to our own expectations, right? But I'd suggest all of that sense is founded on the belief that what I am going in search for isn't present now, and I'm going through this process of spiritual practices in order to get there, to obtain something that I'm not now. It's what we were trained to do. It's what we learned to do. Yeah. So, but again, we don't, it may take us a long time before we even wonder what it is that is going on this quest. We're so busy, trying to, check off the to-do list to get to our goal, that we never question the fundamental methodology of what we're engaged in, right? But this movement, it's almost like a restlessness. It's like, it starts out with a denial of what's present now. My life as it is right now isn't sufficient. That's sort of the starting point. And I am going to go on this spiritual quest to, could almost say, sort of validate my existence, right? That may seem too hefty a term, but it has that feeling like I'm doing this to find something that will give me a sense of, meaning, purpose, a, a sense of comfort of being in this world, in this body, for the limited time that I may have here, that sense. And so I'd suggest that that sense is founded on a sense of lack. There's a sense of emptiness almost in this that we're sort of wanting to fill, right? And the presumption is that if we fill it sufficiently, everything will be resolved, right? Everything will fall into place, make sense. Finally I can relax. So what we try to fill that sort of sense of lack with is experiences, right? Experiences, pleasures, of whatever kind. Maybe, the construct of a, cohesive, philosophical structure, feels good. It sort of can relax our mind, or maybe, we're the kind of person that needs to go out in the world and have adventures and sort of feel like we've lived life fully, and that will do it. Or we're maybe more spiritual and thinking, well, what I'm really after is the experience, the enlightenment experience. And once I have that, everything will be fine. And I'm just waiting for it. Yes, I may have had some very powerful, compelling, beautiful, instructive, wonderful spiritual experiences or visions. And then after a while, they subsided, and I found myself back here. But I'm sure there's even more powerful ones. That's what I'm after. Ones that have been nice, sure, but I want the real one, the one that'll finally put it all to rest. That's what I'm waiting for. Right? The problem is that all experiences, all states of mind, all, mental states that we find ourselves in, bliss, joy, happiness, are all subject to change, right? All experience will change. So that the big awakening experience that we're waiting for also has the characteristic, like all other experiences, that it is impermanent, right? So all this movement towards some future magnificent experience, first of all, is delegated to the future, and second of all, when it finally comes, it might be mind-blowing, it might be transformative, but it is in itself not enlightenment. It's an experience. And like all experiences, it happens within that which we are. Right? Okay, so all this movement towards achieving some permanent state or having the right experience or the right ongoing experience, all of that will be discovered sooner or later to be in vain. Right? Not good news for the ego, right? It's been described by some as the final disappointment. It doesn't sound that glorious when you say it like that, right? But it's the final disappointment for the ego, because the ego is what is created by this belief in lack, belief in a current deficiency creates this ego, this movement towards wanting to consume more, attain more, get more. Almost like an amoeba sort of feeding on nearby particles, bringing them into its sphere. You've seen that in biology class. They sort of ease around the food particle and then it's inside them. We do that with, experiences and relationships and, um, you know, personal achievements, philosophies, all of that we tend to accumulate, hoping, we don't say this out loud, of course, but sort of hoping that um, through that accumulation, there'll be a sense of self-enhancement sufficient to offset this really deep-seated sense of lack, unworthiness, restlessness for more. So that, and I suggest that that movement, that restlessness for more is actually justified, just misplaced. It's justified because what we take ourselves to be, which is this separate self entity, isn't substantial. We sort of know that. We sort of know that it is a pretender to the throne. So it always requires this sort of enhancing activities to sort of keep it pumped up. It's not a real entity. When we actually go looking for it, you would think it would be the easiest thing in the world to pinpoint, but when we actually go looking for it, what we have endless trouble with is actually finding it. What we do find is we find, our opinions and our memories and our hopes and dreams and fears and doubts and griefs and blames and shames and judgments and all of that. That we find, but we don't find the entity that's doing it. Doesn't actually exist. It exists as sort of a swirl of these self-reflective thoughts. That's what all it is. So, and it concludes sort of, one of the swirling thoughts is that there's, so much happening here. There must be someone doing it. That's me, right? And there's some, basis for that. You walk around and you see what you see and you hear what you hear, and it, all is happening in this immediate vicinity. That's where it's being registered, right? So, the assumption is, well, there's obviously someone in there doing it, someone in charge there. I call it me or I, thousands of times a day. But when we actually go to try to find it, it is surprisingly elusive, like infinitely elusive. And what we're talking about isn't the higher self, right? It's not that, parental, judgmental self that, has the, upright ideas, and it's, just my lower self that is sort of the unruly child. Those are just, two different voices happening. But we can really look at that, and as we go down this spiritual road, this pathway that seemed so promising at the get-go, there can be a certain level of frustration that builds up, which is a good thing. It's a good thing because we're going in the wrong direction. It's life's way of sort of tapping us on the shoulder, to get our attention. That frustration is, you know, um, a way that we're informed that um, we're looking at this at this apparent pathway in a way that's not quite right. Right. So this whole spiritual quest is based on the assumption that what I'm looking for is not present now, but can be in the future if I practice these steps that I've been told. Right? But it starts out with a denial of what I'm looking for is being present now. So if what we truly are is present now, can you see that wherever we look for it will be the wrong direction? If it's here already, let's just say I have a dog, and the dog is hiding in the closet, but I don't know he's hiding in the closet. It's a small house. I thought I looked everywhere, but the dog's still in the closet. So I really love this dog, and so I run outside and start calling for the dog, and I can't find the dog. And then I ask the neighbors to get involved, and we all go on this hunt for this dog everywhere except where the dog is and always has been, which is in the house. How long will it take us to find the dog? The only when we're convinced that the goal is outward, not here but there, when we're convinced of that, um, all of those efforts to find it there will lead ultimately to frustration because it's not where it's to be found. It's not found in an experience. It's not found in a pleasure or sensation or a thought or a feeling or state of mind. That's what we are already. Okay, so when the dog actually gets found is when everybody finally gives up any hope of finding the dog, and we get frustrated. We're in a hopeless state. Everything is lost. All I can do is go back home. And there's the dog. Dog's always been there, right? Similar, right? So the point of frustration is actually not a bad thing. And it may take considerable seeking before we're ultimately frustrated. Like really frustrated, like just totally played out. It's not something that you can pretend that you're played out in hopes of gaining some advantage. So we can see all this movement outward to attain something, to grasp something, to bring something, some experience, some state into our field, is not at all different from all of the other goal setting that we've done elsewhere in our life. And unfortunately, spirituality has a different set of rules. So when we try to apply the same methodology that works, this results-seeking methodology, sometimes we have to seek our hearts out before we're willing to give up the search, really. And we find ourselves back where we've always been, right here, right now, in this life. Right? Not very appealing to the ego. Right? All of that work, all of those years, all of that hope, dashed. But where we find ourselves, it's back where we've always been, true, but without that movement of looking for something more, looking for something that's not here, right? It's minus that result-seeking tendency. We just find ourselves here in the middle of life in the present tense. And what's surprising is that it is okay. Not only okay, surprisingly okay. I mean, magnificently okay. Because we're no longer using life as a medium to get what we want. We're allowing life to, come towards us rather than chasing it. We settle into, much more receptive state where we're, just rather than pursuing, in the hopes of gain, we're sort of in a more relaxed state, trusting that life will bring, a beautiful smorgasbord of experiences and states, high states, challenging states, all kinds of experiences, with quite an amazing sort of flow to it, synchronicity to it, serendipity to it. It's life, right? We were chasing it, so we didn't really get a chance to notice how it was presenting itself all along. So one of the things that relaxes is this whole movement of I've got to fix myself, I've got to improve myself, I've got to qualify myself, because that's what it's about. And as long as we believe that, there's no end to it. There's no end to how we can improve these organisms, right? This body, mind, we can always think of ways where it could be better, it should be better. The only question is that what true spirituality is really about? And I would suggest that it's not. It may happen as a consequence, hopefully, but not as the fundamental discovery. The fundamental discovery is that which we are, we have always been. We couldn't be otherwise. That which we fundamentally are isn't in need of improvement. Just recognition, that's it. Right? So what we are can't be gained, can't be lost, can't be given, and it can't be taken away. That's good news, right? It's what we are. It's what we inherently already unavoidably are. Just waiting for it to, it's really waiting for it to discover itself through the form that is you. It's almost like this cosmic game of hide and seek, where the one reality decides to, this is just, conceptualization, of course, but the one reality, hides in your form and waits to discover itself. I'm hiding in the closet. Can it discover me now? I'm hiding behind this tree. Can it discover me now? I'm hiding in the river. Can it discover me now? And when it does discover itself, there's immense delight, right? There you are. You were there all along, but I didn't know it because I was confused by this form, and now I'm not. Now I can see what's always been there. So this awareness that we're talking about isn't a thing, right? It's not an experience, it's not a state, it's not a thought, it's not even a feeling, not even a really, really good feeling. Those may all happen, but it is what notices all of that, sort of knowingly is present for whatever is arising, a thought, a feeling, experience, whatever. But it can't, we can't look at it, look at awareness as we would look at an object, right? It's sort of like, a flame can't feel its own heat. A knife can't cut itself. A pin can't poke itself. Your mouth can't taste itself. It can taste food in it, but it can't taste itself. And consciousness can't stand outside of itself and look back at itself. We can try to do that kind of chiropractic maneuver in our head, but in reality, consciousness can't do it because consciousness is what's noticing everything. There's nothing outside of consciousness, right? It'd be like, let's say the universe had was an entity, a sentient being, the entire universe may be, right? But since it's the entirety of everything, it can't step outside of itself and look at it. Wherever it stepped outside of it would still be the universe, right? So it's the same with consciousness. We can't step outside of it because it is where the entirety of our experience happens. Everything that we've ever experienced, high, low, mundane, indifferent, everything has only ever happened within your consciousness, within your awareness. Okay. Quantum physicists, the forefront of, scientific thought. It's now 100 years old, but it still feels, sort of mysterious and new. But quantum physicists say essentially the same thing. Max Planck is considered the father of quantum physics. Said consciousness is fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. This is a physicist talking, right? But we don't actually need a physicist to tell us what we can experience directly. We can just, check in with our own direct experience and see that whatever perception or sensation or thought or feeling that we can ever experience can only happen within consciousness. So we can validate just in our own direct experience that consciousness is fundamental. Fundamental because without it, no me, no world. So we're not saying that the body-mind doesn't exist. We're not saying that the world doesn't exist. We're just saying that it doesn't exist in the way that we thought it did. this body-mind as a separate organism um, doesn't exist as a separate self-entity. It exists as as a beautiful arising within consciousness, within the consciousness that we are, that um, enlivens these bodies, that knowingly is present for whatever this body-mind engages in. Beautiful, right? But we can see that everything that has a form, everything that exists in time and space, all of those things, whether it's as ephemeral as a thought or a feeling, or as more solid like a rock or a tree, or these body minds, all can be considered as objects within the field of awareness. The awareness is the unifying reality. So everything that has form, present in time and space, is an object, whether it's a thought, a feeling, these bodies, the big wide world outside. And then there's a subject, the ultimate subject. This ultimate subject that we've referred to as I, that we think is this limited self-entity that's housed somewhere in this body-mind, maybe up in my head somewhere, that we find out ultimately doesn't actually exist. But what does exist, this sense of I in the deepest possible sense, is awareness. Right? So I've been using the word awareness or consciousness. They're sort of neutral terminology, but if you're more theologically inclined, you could call it spirit. As long as you don't sort of give spirit um, an entity that's separate from what you are. If you think it's some foreign entity like spirit, no, it's what we are. It's what we actually refer to when we say I. We just assume that it's somehow housed within this body mind, but it's the actual home location is in this awareness that we are. And the good news is we are that already. So sometimes it takes years of questing, years of seeking results outside of ourselves, trying to accumulate merit and wisdom and knowledge and ideas and philosophies and experiences and visions. And when we're finally exhausted in that search and we come home, we find out that it has been waiting for us all along, because it's what we are. So sometimes, I'm not saying at all that all of that search is of no value. It is of value if it leads us back to what we essentially are. Sometimes we just have to, the fascination of creation is so amazing that it is almost inevitable. It is inevitable that we get lost in it and we explore it and we seek our hearts out. And hopefully one day, if we're lucky, we get frustrated enough that we are willing to look at what the source of all of that seeking is. That source of seeking is, I would suggest, source itself, seeking itself, seeking seeking to recognize itself within what you are. what you are already.